all you Gretas and Shutezcats out there. Welcome to Unit 5, Section 2, Forestry and Clearcutting. So we're going to look at forest and then cutting them down, because that's what humans do. So a forest, I'll put me up here. Forest, this forest. Forest is land dominated by trees and other woody vegetations and sometimes used for commercial logging. So we have different operations for commercial timber. 73% of them are privately owned. This allows them to harvest in exchange for a royalty that is usually a percentage of the revenues. The government spends more money on managing than it receives in royalties, so logging is effectively subsidized. Yet another thing that we subsidize, and it doesn't really make nearly as much money as you would think. So timber harvest practices. Now, the main way that people will harvest is doing something called clear cutting, and that's going to remove all or almost all of the trees in an area. So you establish the trees, they grow up, they become mature, you cut them all down and repeat. So the benefits, it's the easiest because you're chopping down everything in an area. It's usually the most economical, so you make the most money fastest. And usually often the stands are replanted, so they do it again and again and again. But there's a massive reduction in biodiversity because you usually have like one or two types of trees in those areas. When they're clear cut, you're going to have a huge increase in wind erosion and loss of the soil nutrients because you have nothing keeping that soil in place. You're going to have a lot of stream sedimentation as all of that eroded soil and nutrients goes into the stream. You're going to have increased mudslides and then increased water temperatures because all of the trees that were around the streams and rivers and lakes that were shading the area are no longer there. And so you're going to have increased water temperatures, which means decreased oxygen and dead stuff. Here are some pictures of your mudslides, what it looks like after you've clear cut an area and all of the sedimentation in the stream. Then you can have what are called tree plantations, which is kind of like a tree farm. These are clear cut and they are quickly replanted with single fast growing species. So it's all one kind of tree, usually. They'll never mature into diverse ecosystems, and there's a lot of nutrient depletion from the soil because they just quickly are growing as many trees as possible. And honestly, it's a much lower quality wood because of how quickly they grow. Then you can have what is called selective cutting, and this is removal of a single tree or small amounts of trees. The young seedlings will grow next to the established old growth trees. So you have an optimum growth amount of shade tolerant species because you always have areas where there's some shade and then there's less shade in other areas. Less erosion, there's less loss of biodiversity because you always have some that are growing. So clear cut, everything is gone, but in selective cutting, you keep some big and then you've got some grown up. But there are still drawbacks that are the same, such as you're having to create logging roads to get the vehicles in and out to bring the trees out. The optimal source is going to be your ecologically optimal source is ecologically sustainable forestry. So you're maintaining and remaining conscious of maintaining that biodiversity and keeping all the different kinds of trees in the forest. But they also try to impact the ecosystem as little as possible. So they have horses that are used to pull the logs out, so you don't need to have roads in and out. They'll reduce soil compaction because a horse weighs a lot less than a car and a big truck. It is difficult to compete with mechanized practices. So a lot of people who have done this in the past are selling out just because they can't. They need the money. But if you can afford to do an ecologically sustainable forest, it's going to be much better, and it's actually going to be a lot higher quality wood that you will be able to sell. So there's some conflicts with logging. You can look at, okay, we just want to make as much timber as possible to build stuff, or do we want to maintain biodiversity? So this little guy, the marbled murrelet, it nests in old growth coastal redwood forests. So we need to not cut them down if we're going to keep this guy. Then we come to the northern spotted owl case study. So these guys live in only old growth coniferous forests. Less than 10% of what originally was here remains. 1991, I was in junior high. Logging was stopped by a court due to the Endangered Species Act because that's where they lived. Many job losses were projected to happen because of these guys, and this became a symbol of government overreach with environmental legislation. Jobs were already being lost at this time, and so when they said, hey, thousands of people are going to lose their jobs because of an owl, people got kind of grumpy. So owls are an indicator species. So an indicator species is going to indicate the health of an ecosystem. So the more of them you have, the healthier the ecosystem is. And as they go down, the ecosystem is getting less healthy. And as they kept cutting and cutting the trees, it was getting less and less healthy. So it became a huge issue in the early 90s. Who gives a hoot? A lot of people could care less about the owl. They cared about the 30,000 jobs that were being lost. To make it on the cover of Time, you've got kind of a big deal. But some people were trying to save the spotted owl, but then a lot of people were not trying to save the spotted owl. Save a logger, eat an owl. So you can this was before social media, so people had to actually make signs and go outside with them. Proud to be a politically incorrect, straight, white, pro-life, pro-gun Christian, and of the opinion that spotted owl tastes like chicken. All right, I'm just reading it. Zero comment. You guys come to your own conclusion about that one. So just some interesting things from the day. Owls won't feed my family. I can read that one. Who gives a hoot about owls? Silly bird watchers are putting our lumberjacks out of work. So they don't value nature or what nature can provide at all. They just want the jobs. So there are 2 articles that you can read. The links are in your packet, talking about tracking the sound of the spotted owl's extinction and death of the giant forest. Forests are getting shorter and younger in the Northwest and elsewhere. And you have survived yet another round of notes. So before I go, I want to let each and every one of you know that you are good enough, you are smart enough, and people do like you. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good God, do your homework.